All right. Well, I want to propose a question to you, to everyone that's here, because it's something I've been thinking about a lot, and it'll kind of be a nice little segue into the round table. And so, my thoughts are when it comes to agents, we've got this way that we've built our, especially certain websites like marketplaces or e-commerce websites that don't necessarily give data to the outside world. And they've got all this rich data on how people interact with the websites and all this good stuff. And the question that I was talking with a friend about that I would love to hear others' opinions on is in the future, do you feel like there's going to be an agent that will go and be able to grab that data? Or is it going to be each marketplace has their own agent and you almost have to sync with the Uber agent for Uber Eats or the whatever, the Amazon agent? And so is it like I'm going to have my Google agent and Google's going to go and sync with all those? But like Amazon might not expose its data to a Google agent because it wants you to come directly to it and it loses its direct relation with the customer. So I've been thinking about this. It's a little less technical and more esoteric, we could say. But who's got thoughts?
Yeah, I can definitely say I could see a world where the API interface evolves into something that looks more like an agent that you're communicating with. And so, maybe your Amazon API turns into an Amazon agent and you ask questions related to the specific Amazon domain and it gives back answers. Um, and that as an alternative, I think that's also much more easy to integrate with people like trying to build their own GPTs or that kind of thing where they don't want to learn or understand the nuances of specific APIs and the different ways that data handles that. And so they can like abstract that away for different people to use the agent rather than the direct API or the direct data itself.
Yes. Awesome. What do you got, Hassan?
So I believe, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe that there is space for both of these architectures. I think you're gonna have the situation where you want to have a super app or super agent, which is basically having deeper like integrations with all these sub agents and so forth. And you're gonna be having the situation where you say, no, let's actually have a lot of specialist marketplaces, for example, and each of them has their own very specialized agent, and then basically a higher level integration only. Both of these are going to be, they're going to have pros and cons. I don't think that it's a little too early for us to say this is the only way to go or this is the only way to go.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you have an agent which is deeply integrated for all the use cases all at once, or for all the marketplaces all at once, you're gonna have it very monolithical, and then basically it's gonna be all coming from one hand. There is disadvantages in basically, I mean, you have less noise, but there is a chance that you're not gonna have the same kind of like breadth, let's say, for example, vis-a-vis if you have basically a lot of super specialized agents which are combined on a higher level together, where everyone is like, I don't want to do the Uber app all over again.
Yeah.
There's no makes no sense, or yet another eBay and yet another. I mean, it's gonna be hard because they're already in that market for a very long time. They have data which they so maybe interface on a higher level with them instead of having the need to go into the data. They might not need we I don't might not need that data that deeply, and can integrate on a higher level with them. I had actually a question from your presentation. I loved your presentation, by the way, Shivud. But one of the things which comes to my mind when I'm looking at this is, um, we're always thinking about building agents, which is perfect. And then we always have to like re-evaluate the agents again when we need to think about policies and data access and stuff like that. So obviously, the different architectures you presented three, which are very common and very strong, actually, and each of them has their pros and cons, like you described. Um, there is also considerations in terms of policing agents, right? I mean, how do you basically integrate? What kind of control do these policing agents have if you're talking about like something which is call center or something which is running like sequentially or manage? I mean, how do you think about these things? Do you consider that like an agent as part of the agent pool of agents? And if that's the case, how do you integrate them in the one architecture versus the other architecture?
Yeah, yeah. And just to clarify, by policing, do you mean like is the agent performing well, or is it like accessing like data it's not supposed to?
It's a great question. So, from our perspective, when people build agents on our platform, it can come in multiple three categories. One is it can be I need to figure out that things are HIPAA compliant, for example. It's policy. It's the policymaker told us that there is something like that. We need to abide by it. The second thing might be to say, no, I, as a company, have a policy as well to say, okay, you know what? The content has to be good with children's. I mean, the 7-year-old should actually be seeing the content which comes out of the agent and be safe. That's number two. So it's not defined by the policymaker explicitly, but implicitly, basically. Or it can be in the same category. I think we have also company might have policies to say things have to be abiding a certain rule to be brand compliant to us as a company or something like that. The third one is operational compliance, right? I mean, say, oh, let the agents talk to each other as long as they want, but I need the result to come in, I don't know, 10 seconds or something like that. This is the third category of policing, so to say. I mean, so policing agents can be different. I mean, but I mean, if you have them if you have the architecture like you described, where do you plug them? Where would they basically fit?
Yeah, yeah. All but the like answering within 10 seconds one, I think could be handled with sort of any of the architectures in the sense of hey, respond in this format or respond in this kind of thing. That becomes an instruction. And then that
Mm,
itself becomes something that you can now break into another sub agent. And so maybe,
mm,
you have the assembly line where maybe the last agent's purely like, hey, clean the response or purge these details from the response. Or maybe even the beginning of the agent is like, hey, let's not access these data sources for this specific user because, it could lead to a subpar answer. But I think it really depends on like whether it's like this sequential thing, whether it's like a domain thing. If you're in like the call center one, then that's an instruction that you now have to apply to every single subdomain. In like the manager worker one, then it's all complexity that the manager has to handle, but not complexity that the workers have to handle. Um, so yeah, it could honestly be either of them. I think fundamentally it's just it becomes an instruction that you now have to modularize somewhere in the system.
got it.
So, so good. Now, another thing that uh, I have been thinking about, and I would love y'all's opinion, is these GUI agents or computer use agents are quite popular. And even just web agents, if we don't want to go full computer use, web agents are popular. API agents are also an easier route these days, it feels like, even though it's not like any of this is super easy, especially if you want to get it productionized. How do you all see this going forward? Like, do you think we are going to, I guess, pros and cons of each? Do you prefer building one or the other? Like, I would love to just get everyone's opinion on, are we going to be in a world with GUI agents? Are we going to be in a world with API agents? Is it going to be a hybrid where sometimes it's API, sometimes it's GUI? And I guess that would be the easy answer again. But maybe you all have thoughts on this or strong opinions, and so I want to open it up to that.
Yeah, I can definitely say that while both of them are probably here to stay for a while, the GUI agents seem to me, even with very advanced AI, like more failure prone. Like it's not like a great interface for a computer to interact with versus like a nice defined API. And so I could see generally people who want to have their site content or data indexed better by AI will be incentivized to provide an API or like an MCP server kind of for their data. But probably, as consumers, we want to access as much data as possible to connect with all the sites we want, which probably means using a GUI style interface for interacting with stuff that doesn't support that API yet.
Yeah, it makes me think like we need better APIs or we need more in-depth APIs. I don't know if you've thought a lot about like maybe the API evolution needs to be different because of the agents and the way we interact with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think compared to the traditional API, I think the MCP protocol, which like Anthropic has been pushing a lot, is a pretty good example of like what it means to go from like an API to an agent API, where rather than just kind of raw documentation or any number of different data formats, you sort of provide this nice like JSON schema with like natural language descriptions. I think there's definitely been an incentive for people to make their APIs like into that format.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. And I think to your question about whether it's going to be the one or the other, I think it's going to be both. At the end of the day, it depends on what kind of company you are and what you want to optimize for, right? At the end of the day, this is going to be, and some of the agents we're never going to see in, I mean, they don't have an interface. They basically are somewhere sitting in the back and doing and optimizing processes and whatnot and so forth. And I think um, you might end up seeing actually even more of those in the back end. I mean, not today. Today, it's mostly on the front end. I mean, we're interfacing immediately with agents because it's an exciting new way of how to interact with AI. So, but down the road, I see that basically to some extent we're going to see a phase shift, a paradigm shift from microservices, right? Which basically were the building blocks of SaaS, a cloud, towards agent infrastructure, agentic infrastructure, right? I mean, where you basically don't need to worry about how do agents talk to each other and whatnot. Let them deal with that. You just say agent A and agent B, you better work with each other because I want this solution to come out of it. And then how to interface them with each other should actually be a matter they need to worry about, not us anymore. So this is basically the medium and long-term way how we should look at it. So roles are going to be important. How the interfaces are going to look like, the APIs are going to look like against each other. Let that be a problem the AIs can actually deal with themselves.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. They'll figure out some very efficient way to make it work. And I do think that the background agents or back end agents, as you were calling them, that's a good call. Like right now, it is very new, and we want to ask agents to do things for us with a prompt box, but I don't necessarily think that's the best way that we interact with them. And if I can point and click and get something done and I don't have to formulate a prompt, as my one friend said, it's much less cognitive load on me. And so it's a much better user experience.
Definitely. I think the interfaces we're going to evolve. I mean, we're talking already about multimodality and different signals and language and text. And now people are actually looking at clicks and behavior on the interfaces and whatnot being part of the signals which are going into some of these agents and whatnot. But we needed to start somewhere. And language is something which we all deal with on a daily basis and know how to deal with. We can interpret that easier, etc., etc. But this is not. We're just in the beginning of the the transformation of how we are building our architectures and our systems.
Yeah. Yeah, great call. Well, unless there is anything else from y'all, I think that's it. This was awesome as always. A huge thank you to the both of you for giving these talks. We're going to throw them up on YouTube real soon. So if anybody really enjoyed it and wants to share them with friends, you can do that. I'll also be sending you the emails to give you the recordings. And a huge shout out to our sponsor of these events, arcade.dev. You can check them out. I will put them into the chat right now in case you want to have a look. They're doing agent auth stuff. So gotta thank them right now. And for everybody that does not know, we've got another AI in production virtual conference coming up on March 12th. Hope to see you all there. These are the big events, and it should be fun. So thanks again to you guys for these talks, and I will see you all later.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me. See ya.
Bye.